Hello and welcome to my health law presentation. My name is Jessica Bastedo, and I'll be particularly focusing on a mental health case study involving Kachar and Russell. So I wanted to provide you with some background information regarding the case. So to start off with, Ryan Russell was 35 years old and 11-year police veteran. He was killed on a Toronto street on January 12, 2011. And he was killed by a guy named Richard Kachar, who is 44, and he's the defendant in the case, who once lived a normal life with a wife and 2 kids in Toronto and later St. Catharines. However, his life had been going in a downward spiral 2 years before the incident. His marriage had failed and his mental health began to slide. Kachar had big dreams, however, none of them came true. By 2010, he was spending his nights in homeless shelters. In the days before the incident, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He hopped on a bus from St. Catharines to Toronto without taking anything with him, rambled on about white Jesus and going into business with the Kardashians, worried about what cameras were everywhere. Less than 24 hours later, the morning of January 12th, he was seen through the streets in a stolen snowplow ranting nonsensely about the Taliban, Chinese technology, and Russian Facebook. So the incident happened at night where Russell was responding to a few different calls that people had reported to see Kachar operating the stolen snowplow. Russell was trying to get Kachar to stop operating the snowplow. However, he didn't know what this man's intentions were, and he didn't know who exactly was driving the vehicle. And unfortunately, Kachar struck and killed Sergeant Ryan Russell as a result of this. Immediately, Kachar was taken into custody and was assessed by 3 separate forensic psychiatrists. And all 3 of them were testing for malingering, which is a medical term for faking or exaggerating symptoms. And all 3 psychiatrists found Kachar difficult to diagnose because his illness had a number of unusual features. Ultimately, they settled on an unspecified psychotic disorder or some form of schizophrenia. The uncertainty about a diagnosis, however, did not affect their opinions about his mental state at the time in question, and all 3 concluded that from the time he fled the Good Shepherd shelter, barefoot in the snow, to the time he was apprehended, he was suffering from a psychotic disorder and was in a state of psychosis. So the final verdict of this case came down to all 3 forensic psychiatrists, in which came to the same conclusion that Kachar was deemed not criminally responsible on account of his mental disorder. Out of that came the defense we have today, not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder, often shortened to NCR. The new law created provincial review boards to oversee patients found not criminally responsible or mentally unfit to stand trial. NCR is not a guilty verdict, but it isn't quite acquittal either. It's an in-between judgment through which the law recognizes that a person who did not have the mental capacity to form criminal intent cannot be found guilty of a crime. People found NCR are treated as patients, not criminals, and though their freedoms are restricted in hospital, they are not meant to be punished. So out of this, the Section 16 of the Criminal Code mentions 2 questions. So the jury has to prove that did the accused have a mental disorder at the time he committed the act, and was the accused incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of the act or incapable of knowing the act was wrong. So, in other words, the jury had to be convinced that it was more likely than not Kachar had a mental disorder when he struck Russell, and that it was more likely than not the illness made him do it. And for the second requirement for NCR, all 3 concluded that Kachar's psychosis made him incapable of knowing exactly what he was doing. So I just wanted to discuss some information regarding the case, and which relates to information we have discussed throughout the course. And an obvious one is the concern for patient safety, because many people believe that people with mental illness are dangerous and they should be institutionalized. However, there's going to come to a point where if Kachar follows the regulations and policies, that eventually he will be allowed back into the community under certain restrictions, obviously. And so that raises concern for many people within the community because they worry about their risk of getting hurt and ultimately the risk of him hurting himself. So with this, the Criminal Code has made a subsection which consists of 67245 or section 67247, in which it takes into consideration the need to protect the public from dangerous persons and the right for public safety. So lastly, I just wanted to touch on human rights, and Canadians have the rights and freedom to be free from discrimination affecting people with mental illness and the right to liberty. So once Couture gets out and he's allowed to be back in the community, providing that he takes medication and follows the policies and regulations, that he does have the right to live the most normal life he possibly can. So to have a job, to have housing in which he's not discriminated against. So these are the references that I used for my case, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.